Greetings, I'm Pillar Nexus Ancient Gladiator with more Pillar List tabletop games. So we come back to the tier list for all the games I covered in the second edition. Let's revisit the considerations, like can I teach it easily, can it set up quickly, is playtime reasonable, are choices meaningful, is it language dependent, is it a new experience each game, how highly can I recommend it to others, and most of all, just my personal taste, because, there might be little things I like about the game, like its theme or style or whatever. So you remember the tier list from last time. I had my rankings absolutely positive, mostly positive, moderately positive, somewhat positive. This tier list I'll be adding, I swear I'm trying to be positive. And these were the games that have been previously ranked. So now let's go on to the new ones. Splendor is absolutely positive, as long as it's got the expansion. It plays quick. There's no text to worry about for different groups, and the gem shape included with color for recognition is really nice. I have to recommend the expansion because it adds replayability through all those different modules, and otherwise the base game is kind of predictable. Uh, it could stand to I don't know, 4 players seems kind of small, but I guess it seems like the right size for that game. If that's what they went with. Also, the box could be a bit smaller. They always put in these inserts that take up all the space, and it's like I sleeve my cards, and then the cards don't fit in there anymore. So the insert comes out, and now there's all this space in the box. War Chest is mostly positive because it plays quick, and the cards feature the pictures for demonstrating the rules, and the randomness can be mitigated. And then also there's all those potential matchups, which are fun. I like the little historical scenarios. I'd like to see more of those. Um, the game is heavy, though. If you have the base game expansions in one box, that thing is a brick. And it might be on the costly side for a game that's basically meant for 2 players. I know we can play it with 4, but it's there are cheaper 2 player games out there, but I really do think this is an interesting experience. MIL, aka 1049. It's a moderately positive, for no game text, and it's important to get that rules update if you're gonna play it when you find a copy. It's hard to stall the game out too long without paying for it because time tokens will kill your knights. The theme is interesting. The art not so much. The vassal system might be a pain to explain as well. Um, Also, there's the whole thing of the guys in this world get pictures. The women in this world are kind of screwed. Represented by cubes on the lineage. It kind of sucks. That it. I want to see the fantasy world with like female knights and stuff. But I guess that's for a fantasy game, not a history game. Oh well. Britannia gets a moderately positive because playing through history is cool. There's no random event story about it. It's all laid out on that schedule track. The combat system's okay. The scorecards could use a map guide for seeing where things are, and it is a long game. There are other games with similar concepts but easier approaches for newer players, and that are more readily available, such as Small World. But I still think the whole playing through, the history of this island is pretty interesting. I mean, it's worth trying out once in a while, especially with friends who are really into history. The Great City of Rome gets a moderately positive for playing quickly. You can't really stall the game out because your choices are limited, ultimately. And there's no text to worry about for those groups. They're trying to play international and all that. The thing is, it could be a bit predictable after a few games, and maybe not as exciting for veteran gamers as new ones. But I still think it's a nice little game to play with a group of 4 people, or even 2. It's nice. Apocalypse Chaos gets a somewhat positive. The art style is pretty cool. There's minimal text in game, and some equipment might take it. And you can make your own missions and adjust the difficulty. It is very, very random. All the dice rolling and all that. It requires luck or absurd degrees of planning to really pull through in this game. This is a game that wants you dead. Other cooperative games are less punishing and more accessible. Um, I'll be covering the Night Cage next, and yeah, I'd rather play that one. But also, there's plenty of other cooperative games too, like Pandemic and others that are um, less likely to kick your butt that hard. There's also the classic Space Hulk. I almost want to go back and play that again. The Night Cage gets a somewhat positive because the art style is awesome. There's minimal text in game. The little reference card is pretty easy to explain. The atmosphere is just wow. And you can adjust the difficulty and challenge with bosses and other stuff. Success in this game requires massive coordination, and it's entirely possible the randomness ends up screwing you over. But you know what? That's just how the game rolls. It's definitely one I want to run for this weekend for celebrating Halloween. Maybe I'll see people there at the game store. Shadowhunters gets a mostly positive because the art style is pretty cool. The gameplay is fast, and you can get it in multiple sessions, which I always recommend. And it's just entertaining and atmospheric. It's also very random. Um, it requires some text help for some of the cards if you're going to play with people who are not familiar with the language. And I think first aid kit has to be added to that you can't hurt people with it. And good luck getting a copy now for cheap. I was very lucky to get mine from someone I knew for like $100, which is a bit much for a board game, but apparently it's going for a crap load of money now. So yeah, good luck. Mwahaha gets somewhat positive. I mean, it can be humorous entertainment to some. It can be fun to be the bad guy or gal or gorilla. Dice combat threat system is like one of my personal favorites. It's just a cool way to do stuff like that. The art style might be off-putting. Another game from my Wolf has similar issues, in addition to more offensive things. The theme might put people off as well, with being a bad guy and threatening the world with stuff that some things might be a little too soon. And also, it's like very cutthroat at times. You can get screwed in trade or raids on your stockpile empire. You are going to be fighting your other players a lot in this game. On my card games, Shadow of Omega, Beyond Good and Evil get a moderately positive because the art style is nice and it feels engaging to play. You've got your party of characters and going on adventures and taking on encounters and getting advantages and stuff. It's just cool. The expansion fan service might be off-putting to some. Yeah, there's some obscure shots in this Beyond Good and Evil that, yeah. Also, it's got some random elements. Combat's resolved with dice and all that. At least there's some mitigation that you can't fight higher level things in lower level areas, so there's that hope. It can be a bit of a long game, which requires some text notes for certain effects. Then there's that one endgame quest where it has a point where it can't be stopped, but it still requires effort to complete. And it's like I never quite understood if they meant for it to be like that, or if they wanted to make it possible for someone to steal that thing from that player and then complete the quest themselves to win the game. Import Export gets a moderately positive for having all these unique cards and the interesting roll follow system. Play a card and your opponents can either play a card or draw back up and use their crew. The Kickstarter version, which I played with someone else, is pretty cool with the metal pieces. Unfortunately, the system can be kind of crazy with trying to understand how to get the things you want to where you need them. A lot of text-heavy contracts, which require notes, leads to some bunny roll blender situations. Yeah, bunny roll blender is my little term for games that have lots of little things that add up, and sometimes gets hard to keep track of. The retail version uses these tiny cardboard tokens for money, which are a pain. It's That's part of why I'm glad I have my substitute stuff. Silver Retain gets a mostly positive because playing through history is fun. And personally, I like trains and business in Colorado, and Silverton's got all that. It is random, but there's like that rule for first operation to mitigate that. A game can go on for a long time, and also the goods markets can be brutal. Towards the later stages of the game, some of the markets have a potential to like really skyrocket, but the I think it's the copper market that is just the most stubborn thing in existence. Choir gets absolutely positive marks for being a quick game, good for up to 6 players, with no in-game text to worry about, other than the little chart. And that's pretty simple. It's not as punishing as it could be. I mean, um, if you buy stock, it's going to be worth money at some point. It may be worth what you paid for it. It may even be worth more. It can be a bit random with the tiles. You can get screwed out tile placement in late game. There's a bit of math to do. Calculator helps. It might not be as engaging for veteran gamers, but I've still seen people play it, and it's just a solid game that's been around for ages, and it shouldn't be too hard to find a copy. Ogre the uh, Ogre Objective 218 gets a moderately positive for playing quick and no in-game text needed, understanding required. It doesn't take that much table space either, but you still need some room. It's effectively a reskin of another game, though. The Battle for Hill 218. So if you already have that game, I'm not sure if you'd want this one. It can get a bit predictable at times because both sides have the same deck, so you know what's available to your opponents. And it's really only for 2 players, which, but it's okay. Jaipur gets a mostly positive for being a fast game with no text to worry about. The art style is beautiful. It's got that best 2 of 3 setup built in, so you actually have a chance even if you lose the first game. It's affordable. Then the camel system for like fast recovery for your hand is nice. Something to keep in mind. It's only for 2 players, but it's a good 2-player game. I'm sorry, but Diplomacy gets an inconclusive because I've not actually played the game. From what I see of it, it's cool that you can play through history and there's no dice or random events to deal with. And there's no in-game text other than the country and sea names. It does seem like it takes a lot of strategy, though. Almost to the point that it could be predictable at some certain points. And you have to talk with your fellow players and know when to mess up alliances, which may not sit well with close friends. And it's also possible to end the game in a stalemate between surviving nations. And yeah, I'm not sure how rewarding that seems. I'm going to have to find a time and place to play this game and get a better understanding of how it flows. And either I'll really like it or not. Feudal gets a somewhat positive. It's an interesting combat system of being able to move 1 to all your pieces. You could have a 3 versus 3 team game as well. And, there's the 2 ways to win, which is knock out your opponent's royalty or take their castle. Movement takes some understanding for new ideas because it's different from chess. But, not too hard. The map can only be fully rotated instead of individual sections, unless you take a hobby knife to the connections. I sure as hell did, because I want to have a game where I want to mess around with that game and be able to experiment with new setup ideas. It might break it, but you know what? It's more fun that way, I think. Executive decision. I really want to be positive about this game, but man, the market system is cool. And it's entirely possible to play the game online with others by email. And that's, I think it's another selling point of diplomacy is being able to do that as well. Um, but there's no theme. What exactly are these materials and what am I making? Most of the game is just head down paperwork. It's hard to kind of stay engaged with your fellow players when you're just writing down numbers. And really, there's just better games with goods markets. It's why would you go back to something like this when you can play like I don't know Planet Steam or something else? Great Western Trail gets a mostly positive for no in-game text to worry about, and the whole deck building handcrafting system is interesting. You can't really stall out the game too much. You have to move, and you can potentially move as far as you can. Um, as random as it is, it's not as random as it could be, which is not too bad. And personally, I just like cowboys and western shit. Explaining some of the things might be a bit of a challenge. Um, I got to make sure to remember the rules point of station master tiles requiring that you have people, and using one building as kind of a springboard for building a higher level building when you have more people to do it with. But yeah, it's a nice game. Anachronism gets a moderately positive because having historical people fight each other is awesome. Plays a decent time and it's probably cheap by now. I sure as hell got my my two anachronism starter sets for hella cheap. Combat system's interesting with the grid and all that. It might be a bit of a challenge to explain to others. And I gotta wonder about some of the spelling and other things like Newt the Great being spelled Canute. Well, like, what the hell? Cloud Fantasy gets a moderately positive because, it's a fun idea of throwing chips into space. The art's nice. I think some of the names are pretty recognizable from, like, the Magic the Gathering era of that time. And you can play it just about anywhere as long as you got a space to throw chips. Explaining some abilities might be a pain. Starter sets might be easy to get, but man, good luck with anything else. And yeah, some dexterity is required with actually throwing the chips and getting them to land where you want them to. Um, yeah, hopefully your wrists are in good shape for chip throwing. New Angeles gets a mostly positive because the art style is cool, and personally I like cyberpunk. The negotiations over the assets for what action you actually want to do can be entertaining. It is freaking hard, though. I call it Pandemic for Bastards for a reason, and it extends to the difficulty of the game. Problems are hard to solve completely as the events ramp up the crisis. It's like the actions either clear a minor problem or they turn a major problem into a minor problem of a different kind. Particularly stubborn players can cause everyone to lose, even when they're not the freaking Federalists. And the 4-player minimum is might be daunting to assemble. Thunder's Edge. I want to be positive about this game. It's something. The setting's interesting. It's within the Twilight Imperium universe. Deploying units from orbit to anywhere is an interesting idea, especially when you get landing areas built to do more. Unfortunately, it's a product of its time. Cardboard chit units, cardboard for tiles, which are dangerously thin and only marked on one side. Uses punched out cards instead of regular cut cards. It's like, Magic was out of years before this, and they still went with this style of cards. Like what? The box is entirely too big for what comes with it, and really, there's newer games. So many newer games. You'd have to be on some kind of nostalgia trip to really want to come back to this. It's. Uh, I want to be positive about it, but I don't know. Hyperborea gets a mostly positive for me because, the big building cube system is pretty cool. No text to worry about, and just symbols. It's a new experience each game with the different tiles and rune tokens because you'll never know what you'll find, where you'll find it. Up to 6 players, but still playable too. I always like having that range. You just need to be absolutely careful not to lose any of the pieces because let me tell you about having to replace all the cubes for this game once. Ah, boy. Anyway, explaining some symbols might be a challenge as well. There's one that actually lets you utilize powers that your opponents have. But it's, yeah, the symbols are kind of an interesting approach. Descent Journeys in the Dark First Edition gets a mostly positive because it's a fun dungeon crawling adventure, and personally, I like being the Overlord player and just messing with heroes as I see fit. The figures are nice. I want to paint them so badly. I know I'm gonna do a weird job with painting them. I am curious why the melee die needed a range number, and there's quite a bit to explain for certain abilities and effects. Certain character abilities and extra abilities I can have could lead to some powerful combinations or just confusion. It's again another bunny roll blender potential. Game of Thrones Second Edition gets a mostly positive because the Secret Order system is cool and the combat system is pretty cool too. It's enjoyable even with no knowledge of the books. I know I enjoy it. And the expansion adds vassals for fewer players, which replaces the base game's approach, which is to just cut off areas completely. However, it's a long game when you've got a lot of players. You can potentially have up to 8 players in this game. It's just nuts. Alliances leading to betrayal can be off-putting. And then random events can be tricky to deal with because, there's wildlings and just having to deal with bidding for the influence tracks and everything else. Eclipse, New Dawn for the Galaxy gets a mostly positive. The whole action system with not making sure you don't bankrupt your empire is pretty cool. New Galaxy every game, so discovery and stuff is fun each game. I like the customizable ship designs, so you can get like upgrades and have bigger guns, can fly around more places, and all that other stuff. You can be diplomatic with your fellow players and still do decently in the game. I mean, you can get the combat reputation from just fighting NPCs and not have to fight your opponents. And there's that progressive discount technology system, which is cool. It's not suitable for newer players. For crying out loud, please have your newer players play something more welcoming, because Eclipse is hard. The Shadow of the Rift expansion is crazy. It adds stuff that I'm not sure if I'm ready to mess with yet. And the base game ships are kind of. I mean, that's why I'm glad Ship Pack 1 was available. Now, if only they do Ship Pack 2. Clash of Cultures Monumental Edition gets absolutely positive for me. Because, new map each game, full of surprises, and the tech system is pretty cool. You can, although it might be a little bit predictable sometimes with people preferring to do certain technologies on a consistent basis. Combat's nice, just get a die per figure, and then there's clash effects and action cards. It's really interesting. The objectives are interesting because you can decide whether to take the more developmental approach or the more aggressive approach, which is nice. The figures are great, really, especially the wonders. They look so cool. And really, personally, it's just my favorite Civilization game ever. It hit all the marks it needed to, and I'm so glad I've got this game. There is a lot of text though. It can be a bit expensive, so yeah. And it can be a long game, but hey, there's ways to play it short as well. Once players get used to it, it'll run smoother. Oh, I think I left out one point. The trackers. That's right. So apparently, instead of having resource tokens, you track things on a tracker, which annoys me to no end. That's why I took some cubes that I have left over from my other ideas and proceeded to add them to the game. So whenever they play my game, we use those cubes, and it is a lot happier of an experience to me. And finally, we get to Horizon Zero Dawn, which gets mostly positive because the deck building system is cool. The miniatures are awesome. I really, really want to paint them too. And you can play it solo. um, the only other game I think I can um, treat solo on this list was like Silverton, or at least for the stuff I've done recently. And yeah, oh, and Great Western Trail. But the game can be difficult at times, especially when you're getting towards the end. Um, it gets expensive if you want expansions, and you're going to want expansions because you're going to want to have more hunters and machines to fight. Because the base game's okay for a while until you've done everything at least once. And really, there's so many freaking cards for this game. Holy shit. You're going to be sleeving so many of them. And trust me, you're going to want to sleeve cards for any deck building game. Because why would you not? Okay, so final tier review. Um, Absolutely positive in no particular order. Concordia, Splendor, Call to Adventure, Clash of Cultures, Lords of Waterdeep, Acquire, and Endeavor. These are games that get my highest recommendation and games that I will regularly hold on to and try to play when I can. Clash of Cultures might be a little bit tough because it's a long ass game, but everything else is just whatever game night they're gonna hit the table most of the time. Mostly positive games. You remember Terraforming Mars, Infamy, Citadels, Nordstrom Hex, Art of Crown, Soccer Arms, and now we're adding War Chest, Shadow Hunters, Silverton, Jaipur, Eclipse, Great Western Trail, Descent, New Angeles, Hyperborea, Game of Thrones, and Horizon Zero Dawn. They're probably not going to hit the table as often, but the ones that I've chosen to keep are definitely going to hit the table um, one way or another. Um, yeah, I definitely want to play War Chest at least a few times and explore that one with someone who's curious about the game too. But I really want to get Horizon Zero Dawn going because there's a game that could be fun with over a number of sessions. Same thing with Descent. I haven't played Descent in so long, and I haven't run a game where I've gotten to be the bad guy against heroes since level 7 Omega Protocol. So I'm really itching to do a game like that again. Moderately positive, joining Starlight Stage, Sanctum, Warcraft, and Revolution is now MIL, Britannia, the Anima card games, the Night Cage, Import Export, over 218. Anachronism, Cloud Fantasy, and the Great City of Rome. Decent games, probably wouldn't play them all the time, but for the ones I've held on to, I know I want to play the Night Cage for sure. And the Great City of Rome, I'm considering donating to the local library and its board game shelf. So we'll see. I don't have Import Export or Ogre 218 anymore. And I'm seriously considering selling Britannia. But the rest I should still hold on to. And joining the somewhat positive tier with Runebound, Second Edition StarCraft are Apocalypse, Chaos, Mwahaha, and Feudal. Of those, Feudal is the one I still have, along with Runebound and StarCraft. Yeah, you can't win them all, you know. But Runebound is one I might try running again sometime, and definitely StarCraft. But I don't know about Feudal. I don't know who I can convince to play that one with me. And finally, I wish I could really be more positive about Thunder's Edge and Executive Decision. I mean, they have interesting elements, but I don't know who I can really get to play them. I mean, Thunder's Edge, if I could like upgrade it with miniatures, maybe it might have a chance. Um, Executive Decision, though, and it's at this point I'm just kind of holding on to it for historical purposes. Um, like I said, I recommend Planet's Team if you want to play more games that have more variable price markets and all that. Um, Over off to the side of the list in the inconclusive section is Diplomacy. Are there any games where I would put like in a tier below this where it says, okay, now I'm negative? Um, I believe I've mentioned that there have been 2 games that I want condemned to the ash bin of history as shit game designs. And I know Monopoly is low hanging fruit, but let's not go there today. Red Shirts, a game that is just cruelly mocking of the Star Trek world, and it's like, and the game itself doesn't even make up for it. It's random as hell. You're trying to fail. Your opponents are trying to make you succeed, and it's a waste of time. It really is. How do I talk about the other game without getting bonked by YouTube? It's a 4-letter word starting with P, followed by the backhanding by White Wolf Games. There's a game that's just has no place in recent years. It just doesn't. It's more playable than Red Shirts, but still, it's it was a dark curiosity to explore way back when with someone who had it, but that's a game that just needs to disappear forever. Um, yeah, it's a really messed up game, but I would rather play Thunder's Edge and Executive Decision over those 2. But yeah, this is tier list 2. There's a game store auction coming up. I may see if there's any games that I can get for cheap. And if I do, I might cover those. But I think I'm at the point where I think I'm done talking about my board games. You know what I left out? I left out Root. Root was my part of the Player Nexus thing. I really don't know where to put Root. It's an interesting game, but I have it more for my solo play automated with the clockwork stuff, and maybe I'll rank it if I do a third instance of this. But I'm really getting tired of this. It's fun to go over these games, but man, the project has been a bit of a drain, and I'm just glad to be done with it. Thank you for checking it out, and we'll see you next time. This has been Pillar Nexus. Take care.